So today's video, I'm going to be talking about seed sowing, and this is a video if you're a beginner or maybe if you're just having trouble with sowing seeds and getting them to germinate and bringing them on. Now, I've been doing this for about 5 years now, and I've had a great amount of success sowing my own seeds and harvesting the vegetables. However, although it's a very simple concept, whack it in, water it, etc., there are a few tips and tricks which can make things easier and you'll get a higher success rate. So we're going to jump straight into the tutorial, and the first type of sowing I'm going to talk about is direct sowing, which is where you sow plants directly in the ground. And this is the method of sowing I probably use the least. I only really use it for carrots and parsnips, whereby if you grow them in pots and then plant them, the roots can become a bit damaged and you won't get a nice uniform root. Now, for direct sowing, it's probably the easiest, and you're going to need the least number of things. So in this case, you only really need some seeds, a trowel, or this is a hori knife, and a watering can, and that's all you really need. So in order to do it, it's really simple. You just make a sort of shallow drill. The depth of that drill will vary depending on the size of the seed you're sowing. I'm doing radish today, a variety called Scarlet Globe, and basically, for me, it's going to be about 1 centimetre deep, I think. And then once you've made the drill, you can water it if the soil is very dry, but here it's not. I'll then sprinkle the seeds in. You've got to try and do that as lightly as possible. If you put the seeds too close together, they're going to be competing for each other and you won't get as good a harvest. But at the same time, if you have really large gaps, you're not going to get the most out of the space. So it's a bit of a balance act, and it's all about practice and sort of seeing how things go. And then finally, all you got to do is cover it over with some soil and then give it a good water. And keeping it watered is the key for any kind of sowing. If things dry out, the germination will fail. The seed will decide, no, I'm not going to sprout at this time, and chances are it'll probably just rot in the ground at that point. Now, obviously that's direct sowing, and the advantage of it is it's easy, it's pretty hassle-free. The disadvantage is that when the seedlings germinate and they're very young and vulnerable, they're very exposed to pests or weather conditions, etc. Whereas if we look over here, these are some radish that I sowed in February under cover and transplanted out, and you can see how good and healthy they look, and that's the type of sowing we're going to talk about next. So indirect sowing is basically the idea of growing seeds in pots first before planting them out. Now, today's video, I've actually got to do some sowings. We're in March now, so I'm sowing some zinnia, purple prince, some leeks, musselburgh, some achillea, cloth of gold, and some cosmos sensation mix. Now, they're a mixture of sort of flowers and vegetables there, but we're going to talk through a few of the key points around sowing in pots. So the first thing to consider when growing in pots is what pot size to use. Now, being a gardener, buying plants and things, I've got a massive variety of pots here. But the idea really, I think, is my advice for any people that are new to this is choose the smallest size possible for the seed size. If you've got a big seed like a bean, then maybe you're going to start off in something like this. Whereas just about everything else, I would advise starting as small as possible. The reason I say that is you'll preserve as much compost as possible, and compost is probably the biggest expense to gardening. Seed is quite cheap, obviously water is typically free or whatever your water bill is, but compost is the thing you buy the most. Now, the ones I want to recommend for everyone are these here. These are, you can buy them from Container-Wise. I'll put a link down in the description where I bought these, but they're incredible. They've got large drainage holes in the bottom, which you might think, oh, the compost will fall out, but it doesn't, because you have to sort of compact it in. I'll show you that in just a minute. But they're also a tapered cell, which allows for a lot of drainage as well. But these are brilliant, and I'll show you exactly how best to use them in just a moment. Now, the next thing to consider after pots is the compost you're going to use. Now, I would always sow seeds in compost, not soil. The difference between compost and soil is when you look at it, it's actually fairly large. Compost is very much an organic matter that's breaking down. Soil is more minerals and sand and sort of mud like. But compost is what you're going to want to sow in. Now, it can be quite confusing, the different types, and I've got a couple different things to talk through here. Now, what I will say is my preferred, cheapest and best way to do it is just some multi-compost that I typically sieve. Now, the reason I sieve it is because when you buy a bag like this, there will be pieces of wood in it, and it's not a problem, but it, you know, especially for small seeds, it's going to block the light to them. It's going to block them being able to push through. So I think sieving, although I wouldn't say it's necessarily required for every type of seed, it's worth doing a little bit of it, and you just get a nice crumbly texture, which I think is really good. You can also, if you don't like the idea of sieving, or you think the multi-purpose isn't any good, you can buy a type of seed cutting compost. Now, the idea with this is it's very fine, and it is generally, I find, quite good for sowing seeds, as it's easy to use and things. But the idea being of it is it's also lower in nutrients, because seeds, when they first germinate, a lot of the nutrients and energy that seed needs is in the seed itself. Sorry, in the seedling, it's in the seed itself. And with that, you don't necessarily need a whole bunch of nutrients that you might have in this kind of very nutrient dense compost, but it doesn't hurt either. So I don't really fully understand the need for seed compost, but if you prefer to use it, go ahead. Now, the other two things I've got is kind of additions that you might use in your compost to make the compost either more free draining or lighter. And there are certain benefits to that. So I've got here some horticultural grit, which is basically really small stones that you could mix into your compost, and perlite, which are like these little sort of porous rocks, which allow lots of air and really help with sort of root development. Now, neither are essential. I don't typically use them. But if you've got maybe like a high value crop, like say chilies or something, which you know you're going to be sort of nursing for a long time, some of these things can be sort of quite useful for different plants. But I'd probably do your research and do a bit of an experiment and see if you can get a difference between the two. I generally always find, and what I'll say in this video is some sieved multi-compost, you can sow just about everything. And it's as simple as that. So to start off with, we're going to sow the leeks. Now, leeks need a long time to grow, so March, April is a good time to grow them. But I'm going to use the sort of, these are called the HR10, and again, the link is in the description for where I get these. Now, typically what I do, the best setup I find is I have a bucket with all my sort of mixed compost in, however I want it, whether it's sieved or whether I want to add perlite to it or anything like that. And I normally have a tray, and that's just to catch sort of mess and sort of keep things contained. Now, with these trays, what I find is best is I basically just shovel in a load of compost, and then using my fingers, I'm just pushing the cells down. Now, what that's doing is it's compacting it at the drainage hole. And then I basically just give it a smooth over like that. And in this case, I need a little bit more compost, and you kind of get it to a point where you've got nice sort of compact soil, not compressed but compact. And then all that's really to do, and I just use my little fingers, just make a shallow little hole as deep as you need for the seedlings. Now, on the seedling packet, it will tell you how deep the soil should be. It might be that it's a centimetre, half centimetre, 2 inches. It normally depends on the size of the seed, as I've said before. In this case, leek seeds are like small little onion seeds, and I'll do a little close-up for you. They do not need to go very deep. Maybe half a centimetre or something like that is going to be plenty deep enough for them. They don't, because the seed is small, it doesn't have a huge amount of energy in order to push its way up. Now, just while I'm sort of sowing these, I'll just talk a little bit about seed packets in general. Now, seed packets are great. They often give you lots of tips on how to get the best out of them. I normally find if I'm wanting to get ahead, you can normally go almost a month before whatever it says the sowing date on the seed packet is. And that's just how it is. The other bit of information interesting on the seed packet is the sow by date, or the year it was packed in. That's telling you how old the seed is. Now, the older the seed, the more likely you're going to get less germination. So typically seed companies will do germination tests, and they're looking for, like, I don't know, 90% germination. So if they sow 10 seeds, at least 9 should germinate. Now, the older the seed gets, it can diminish, and it varies by seed. Some seed can stay very sort of viable for a long time, whereas other seeds will only last like 1 or 2 years. So like chili seeds can last quite a long time, I find. However, other seeds, like for example for me, I always find cabbage seeds just don't last hardly at all. If they're any more than like a year or 2 old, I know they're just not going to germinate for me. And again, these things you sort of learn, but you can do some research online to find out. Now, the other thing I would say with sowing seeds is often I would sow more than one type, more than one seed per module. The reason for that is you're not often, despite what the seed packets say, you might not get 100% germination. And rather than having empty cells, wasted space, wasted compost, it's better if you have two seeds germinate and then you can just pluck one out. Now in this case, I'm doing something with leeks called multi-sowing, where I'm looking for 4 or 5 plants in a clump, and these will grow together and it will save me space in my vegetable beds, potentially give me smaller harvests, but not necessarily a problem. Now, a little tip on watering seedlings. I've got here a little kid's watering can. The reason I've got it is because the rose on it is quite fine, and you're not going to worry about washing away all the seeds or destroying the soil, the compost that you've just put on. And all I do is I water the top, and then I'll wait for it to soak in. And that, obviously in this case, it's quite quick. And then once that's soaked in a bit, I'll water it some more. Just while that's soaking in, I'll show you another method for watering seedlings, and that is bottom watering. So if you notice, all my seedlings here are in trays. Now, rather than watering from the top and things, which there's no real problem with that, you can water from the bottom. And one of the good things about that is the roots will grow down. They will grow down like they would normally, looking for the water, and then they'll pull up what they need, as opposed to a lot of the roots and a lot of the soil sat in soggy, wet compost. So that's another method of watering. All I would say on this one is keep an eye on it. If the plants, after, I don't know, an hour or two, haven't absorbed the water, empty the tray out so you're not leaving them sat in a puddle. Another tip I forgot to mention with watering is quite often I pick the pots up and feel how heavy they are. So this feels really heavy now, so I know it's fully saturated. Whereas if I come over here and I pick up this little foxglove, the pot feels quite light. I can tell that it's not fully saturated. And if I look down at the tray as well, I can see all the water I put in there has been fully absorbed. So what I probably need to do there is just give it some more water. And that's another way you can avoid overwatering your plants and killing them off. Another method of propagating seedlings is doing it in trays. Now, these were some lettuce seedlings that I started off in February, and what I've done is I've plucked them out into their own module trays. But this way of sowing, especially small seedlings in a tray, is really quite a good idea to save space and ensure you're saving compost as well. And I'm just going to show you how to do it here with some cosmos and zinnias. So you get your tray here and you put in your compost. You then will just need to probably just wet the top of the compost just very lightly, not too much. Now, the reason I say not too much is because you're going to have to water it again in just a minute, and you don't want to sort of have the seedlings drowning. Now, for example, the cosmos here, which is a mix called Sensation Mix, I'm hoping it'll be lots of different colours, are quite smallish seedlings, a little bit like, I don't know, marigolds and things. But all I would do is just very gently sprinkle them over the surface, trying to make sure that you've got a fairly even distribution. And then once you're happy you've got enough seedlings on there, you can then cover them over with a layer of compost. Now in this tray, and again, this is another benefit of doing it like this, I'm also going to do my Achillea cloth gold, which I'm really looking forward to growing. First year I'm growing it. I've never actually grown them before, so I'm not too sure exactly how they're going to go, but we will see. And again, I think they're quite small seeds. Oh, bloody hell, yeah, very small seeds, tiny seeds even. Looks a little bit like carrot seed, and I'll do a close-up for you in just a minute. But again, what I'm doing here is I'm just gently trying to get an even coverage of seeds. Now, it is just eyeballing, and it doesn't really matter because the next step, and I'll maybe show you in a separate video, is pricking out. Now, once the seedlings come up, you want to prick them out into their own pots. But the really beneficial thing for here is if you've got a dodgy seed packet where the germination isn't very good, you're not wasting loads of time putting individual seeds in individual pots and having lots of empty pots. Now, the final stage to do here is just to lightly cover them over. And when I mean lightly, these Achilleas do not need much compost at all. So I'm literally just letting it sort of trickle out my hand so it covers over. Cosmos, I could probably get away with covering them over a bit more. But again, it's better to go too shallow than too deep is generally what I would say with sowing seeds. Now I've done that, I'm just going to flatten them, press them down slightly with my hand, really just to help get that sort of contact with the compost and soil. And then again, I'm just going to give them a quick water. Now, not a lot of water, because this is probably my final tip for this video, is cover the top of the seedlings with something transparent. It's got to be transparent, still let the light in. But in this case here, this little tray comes with this little plastic dome, which I can just put over the top. Now what this will do is it will keep the humidity in. Now you won't want to leave this on when you see the first green shoots. As soon as you see that first green shoot appearing, take this off, because otherwise the high humidity can create mold problems and stuff like that, and the plants won't like that. But this, and if you've got a tray like this where I put the leeks in, I could maybe put some cellophane over it, or if I've got another plastic cover like this, just put the plastic cover over the top, and it just helps keep that humidity in and ensure that the seeds don't dry out before they germinate. Now, the final thing to do with your seeds is obviously to put them somewhere warm and sheltered to germinate. Now, this time of year in March, although it's very sunny and warm here in the potting shed, and it's great for the seedlings that have germinated, I would still advise putting your seedlings in a conservatory or on a sunny windowsill inside your house. And the reason for that is the nighttime temperatures in here will get down to potentially even 0 degrees, whereas inside it's always going to stay around, I don't know, 16 degrees, even in my conservatory where it gets quite cold. And that, it gives enough temperature for the seeds to sort of reliably germinate. And obviously as the year goes on, come about April, May, where it sort of stays around 10 degrees at night here in England, you can bring them outside and just sort of leave them in maybe a greenhouse or even outside on the sheltered position to germinate. Now, I really hope you like that video, and if you've got any questions, do leave them in the comments. I've tried to keep this video fairly short, concise on the sort of maybe the 3 different methods I use for seed sowing, but if you've got questions that you want answered, I'll do my best to answer them in the comments. Thanks for watching this video.